Canada just announced a massive change to its immigration system, and it's going to affect thousands of people who thought they had their futures secured. If you're planning to come to Canada soon or you're already here on a temporary visa, whether it's a work permit or a study visa, you need to hear this. So pull your chair and let's go through this together. All right, so there's been a huge announcement that is shaking up the whole Canada immigration scene, especially if you're a temporary resident, that is an international student or someone hoping to work in Canada. I know it can feel overwhelming when rules change like this, and it's happening quite a bit lately in Canada. But don't worry, I'm going to break it all down step by step so you know exactly what's going on and what it means for you. Canada has always been super welcoming to people from all over the world. Canada has seen a huge influx of international students and temporary workers, especially in the last few years. And while that has been great for the economy and for bringing in talent, there's now a problem. It's just too much and too fast. The Canadian government has decided to scale things back a little. So that means that there's likely to be fewer spots for international students and stricter rules when it comes to work permits, as well as stricter rules for employers that employ workers to work in Canada. And honestly, this is happening because the labor market is shifting, and Canada is dealing with some pretty big economic challenges. So if you're a student planning to come here, or you're already studying, or if you're working or thinking about applying for a work permit, these changes could directly impact you. So please pay attention. Now let's dive into the specifics of what is changing and what you need to do to navigate it if you're affected. The government announced that by 2026, they want to reduce the number of temporary residents from 6.5% of the population to only 5%. And that is a huge cut. It's big, and here's how they are planning to do it.
So simply put, the international student cap is here to stay. Over the next 3 years, and I think this is important, we expect these changes to yield approximately 300,000 fewer study permits.
Now, from that clip that you just watched, we have heard that the number of international study permits is going to be reduced. For 2025, the cap is being lowered by 5% from 485,000 to 437,000. That means that fewer new international students will be able to come to Canada. If you are planning to apply to study in Canada in the next couple of years, you will need to move quickly and make sure that your application is airtight. Make sure that you are ticking all the boxes, crossing your T's, dotting your I's in your study permit application. Plus, for those of you looking at post-graduation work permits after you graduate, there's also changes that affect you.
A Canadian language benchmark, CLB, level 7 for university graduates and CLB 5 for college graduates will be required for anyone applying for post-graduation work permit on or after November 1st of 2024. We know that people that can speak the language are better equipped to succeed in Canadian society. This is a more stringent requirement that I think is very important if we are going to continue the successful story of integration of some of these people into Canadian society.
So from the video we also watched, the second thing that is changing is that there will be tighter post-graduation work permit rules. Starting November 2024, the government is introducing stricter language proficiency requirements. If you're applying for a post-graduation work permit or PGWP, you will now need to meet a minimum Canadian language benchmark or CLB level. University grads need a level 7 and college grads need a level 5. This is completely new. And trust me, I think it's completely unnecessary. Because these people just graduated from schools in Canada and they were taught in English. How does them doing the language exam help anything? Results that will expire in 2 years and they have to take another one for PR. This one is completely off. I really don't see the point of the government asking for PGWP for people who had already gotten admission into schools, completed studying in Canada in English. I can understand them doing English exam for PR, but for PGWP, it is completely off and I don't get it. Because the truth is that they would have to do another English language test for PR. But according to the minister, the idea is to make sure that you're better prepared for the workforce and you can transition more easily to permanent residency. But he's forgetting that these international students are already working in Canada. Remember, they can work part time, so they're already integrated into the workforce. How is it that they could already work as students, and now when it is time to transition to PGWP, you are saying that they need to get ready by taking the English exam? Was it not English they were speaking before in the jobs they were doing? I mean, can you guys see my thinking pattern here? Or what do you think? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about this English language requirement for applying for PGWP.
Fourth, for prospective students applying on or after November 1st, post-graduation work permit eligibility will depend on the level of study. Graduates from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs will remain eligible for a work permit up to 3 years. These graduates are more likely to acquire transferable knowledge and skills and be able to adapt to changing economic circumstances over the long term.
In addition, if you listened well, you heard that only students from programs linked to jobs that are in long-term shortage will be eligible for the full 3-year PGWP. I guess the question you're asking is, what are those long-term shortage jobs? We will talk about that in detail in another video, but it's likely trades, healthcare, and construction, plus probably others in agriculture and technology. That is something we have to talk about in detail in another video, but these are likely the types of jobs that the minister is referring to. There are also changes coming for spouses of foreign students and workers.
In the near future, we'll also take further measures to restrict eligibility to spousal open work permits. The fifth measure that I'm announcing today will be to further limit work permit eligibility to spouses of students in doctoral and certain master's select professional programs and certain pilot programs. And over the next 3 years, we expect that measure and these changes to yield approximately 50,000 fewer work permits for the spouses of students groups. And
later this year, spouses of master's degree students will only be able to get a work permit if the program is at least 16 months long. And for spouses of temporary foreign workers, they will only get a permit.
Also be limiting work permit eligibility to include only spouses of highly skilled, specialized workers such as C-suite executives, scientists, engineers, lawyers, professors, and technicians, or of workers in sectors where there are those key labor shortages. Spouses of workers in critical sectors like healthcare, construction will also obviously continue to be eligible for those work permits.
This means that if you were hoping to bring your spouse along and have them work, you will need to double check these new rules before making plans. And since this starts later this year, if your spouse wants to apply, please start their application ASAP. I always say anything about Canada is fast, fast. Do fast before the policy changes. And it's funny because changes to spousal open work permits was just done recently in March of 2024, when only the spouses of masters and PhD students can apply for spousal open work permit. And even though this was painful for those who are not masters or PhD students or those other bachelor programs, it was okay. We have started to accept it. And now the government is pulling the rug under our feet again and saying that your master's program have to be 16 months for your spouse to be able to get the spousal open work permit. Previously, they announced that even if your master's program was only 1 year, you could get that 3 year of PGWP, and your spouse could, of course, apply for spousal open work permit. But with these changes, by the time you're applying for a master's program, you need to try and check that it is one that is 16 months long if you want to get some of these other benefits that accrue to master's students. The government is also dealing with a rise in asylum claims. Canada is getting more asylum applications than before. And to manage this, they are planning to improve how the claims are processed and how they are reviewing the decisions concerning asylum claims so that they can reduce frauds.
And again, there are a number of measures that we need to take to make sure that when asylum seekers come to this country, they get due process, but that there is no abuse in the system, and it is incumbent on the federal government to act when it controls the levers, particularly at the border.
So apparently, they've noticed that there's lots of frauds when it comes to asylum seekers, and there will be changes in that as well. So these are the announcements made on September 18, 2024, and they are very serious announcements indeed. Now, what does all of this mean for you? Basically, if you are thinking about coming to Canada or you are already here, please know that the landscape is changing. The immigration landscape is changing. You can see it, you can smell it, you can feel it. We have been getting back to back immigration changes since the beginning of this year. No, what? Since last year. It's been one change to another with the government tightening restrictions, especially when it comes to international students and foreign workers in Canada. And as the minister had said, there will be more announcements on November 1st, and these announcements would also apply permanent resident applications as well. The minister refused to give any details, so I guess we have to wait for him to make his announcements. I think it's October or November. The way Canada immigration is changing, I doubt that it will ever be the same again. It will not be the same. So please, you're going to have to pay attention to these changes if you're an international student or a foreign worker, or you are the spouse of an international student, or you are planning to even come to Canada to study or maybe to work. It is so important that you keep abreast of these changes because the changes are so regular that sometimes you can even lose you can even lose sight of what has changed and what hasn't changed. So try and subscribe to this channel or to any other channel that you trust so that you can stay abreast of these immigration news as they come. I really wish I had more to say to you, but it is what it is. And when life gives you lemons, you try and make lemonade. Even though making lemonade in this case is really getting harder and harder. Now, Minister Macmillan also said it himself. Not everyone who wants to come to Canada will be able to come.
And as I said in French, it is a privilege to come to Canada. It is not a right.
That's a harsh reality, but it is important to understand that the changes being made are aimed at preserving the integrity of the system and making it sustainable in the long run. Or at least that's what the minister said. It's all about making a balance, right? Welcoming newcomers, but ensuring that the Canadian economy and the society can actually support these newcomers. We have all heard the news: rising cost of living, accommodation problems, people not being able to get rent, jobs they are not finding. So, all of these things, the people are crying, and the Canadian government has actually heard it. And even though they agree that immigration is good for Canada, they are not stopping immigration. Canada is just slowing things down a bit so that they can put their house in order. And even though I know that this affects you negatively, I think that somehow I see the point in them making some of these changes. Not all of them. There are some that I think are unnecessary. But Canada really does need to do something about improving not just immigration, but the system in terms of those who land in Canada as international students, as temporary residents, or even permanent residents. How do they settle down? And how do they live the life that they came to Canada to actually live? I think that's what the government is trying to pay attention to. So you spoke, people have talked, and the government has listened. Or that's what I think. So while it might seem like the door is closing a little, it's really more about making sure that those who do come have the best chance to succeed. So the new policy states that the Canadian government is tightening the rules for international students and foreign workers. Fewer study permits will be issued starting in 2025, and stricter language requirements will come into play for those looking to work after they graduate. Work permits for spouses are going to be harder to get, and there's a big focus on ensuring that asylum seekers and temporary residents are real and can contribute to the economy. Now, if you look at what has happened in the UK and also in Australia in the last year or so, you would see something very similar. The UK has done something similar, so has Australia, and Canada has followed suit. So it seems like these governments are having a meeting, or at least are looking at immigration in the same way. And if you're on the other side, it will be good for you to, in as much as you're considering how this affects you, to look at what could have prompted this. Is this even necessary? And you can be able to imagine what other changes could come in the future. And if you do want to come to Canada, please make haste, because these immigration policies are changing so fast and so frequently that if you qualify for any route at all, please start working on it as soon as you can. You need to make hay while the sun shines. And I've been saying this like forever. So to stay informed, make sure you're subscribed to learn more of what you need to know. We will talk more in later videos about some of these changes. But in the meantime, I want you to keep your hopes on. I want you to stay positive. I want you to trust God. And if there were some things that were delaying you in terms of applying for your study permit or work permit or maybe your permanent residence, go and tighten those things. If you needed to get an English language test or you need to do your ECA, that's your education credential, or if you're still thinking about making up your mind, this is the time to actually make up your mind and start making a move this year. I mean, we don't know what other changes will come later this year and next year. Yeah. So, and I know it can be confusing and overwhelming, but I would encourage you not to give up as long as you still have a chance. Okay. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I know that this is a video that has probably dampened your spirit, but like I always say, keep hope alive. I'm going to leave you with these two videos to watch next, and I'll talk more about some of these changes in my next video. Take care and God bless.